Grab your art supplies. All you need is a pencil, eraser, and a blank sheet of paper. Today, I'm going to show you the simple way to draw eyes at a 3/4 view. The first thing I want to do is frame the rectangle that I want these eyes to fit in on the page, so I know about how large this drawing is going to be. Please don't bust out a ruler. This is a practice warm-up. This is you getting into the zone of learning how to draw the eyes, so rulers are not necessary. First line that I always like to start with whenever I do the eyes at this particular angle is the bridge of the nose that is framing the back eye. And I'm just lightly going to start sketching in the first angles that I see from the eyebrow up here. You can see this kind of triangle of that bridge of the nose coming down. One thing that I use constantly, you'll see in all my videos, is the pencil trick. So to use the pencil trick, you would hold a pencil or pen or whatever you're using up to your subject, and it helps to have one eye closed. Imagine that you're holding the pencil up against a glass wall. But this is basically representing the flat two-dimensional plane of the page. And you're gonna angle the pencil to match the line that you're looking at. So checking this line here, is this angle matching this line I'm drawing in? Okay, looks good so far. So as you can see, even though I'm just starting with a really basic lay-in with these lines, I still want to come back and double check everything I do, because so often our eyes lie to us. They really do. So I'm seeing a slight curve down here. Now that I've measured the angles, how about the length of these lines? So I'm going to take the measurement of the line that's coming down an angle, that top of the bridge of the nose, compare that to the eyebrow. They're about the same. So I'm finding that this line and this line are about the same. Check. Next, I want to look at the negative space or the imaginary shape that is made if you see this back side of the face coming down as if it was its own shape. So ignoring the actual eye inside of there and just looking, isolating this as a shape, just an absolute element of art. What shape do we see this back of the face at? And I want to check the horizontal alignment. Does this indent here, where the curve of the orbital socket dips in, that depth part of our eye, does that match where the nose comes in the most? Seems like they're both, that's about where the eye most comes in. Just got a little sharper of an angle up here perhaps. But that's looking all right to me so far. How about the width that I've drawn it in? Does that match? So if the angle here is yay, does that match the width of the eye? Pretty much. So if this is this long, I may have to bring this in quite a bit and reshape my first initial lay-in. So one thing I want you to really take away from all of my drawing videos is that it is okay, and in fact expected, to make mistakes. Stop and check your work all the time. So moving on to the eye itself, I'm noticing that the inner tear duct is just touching right here on this model's nose. You'll notice there are actually several lines around the eye, the upper eyelid curve, this rim of the lower eyelid. I want to only look at where the skin is touching the white of the eye. I'm finding that it swoops in, something like so. And if I check the angle here, it's a really lovely, beautiful curve that comes in before it dips back down again with the upper part of the eye. Here is one of the most important things to take away from this entire tutorial, and that is the kind of upward line at the far edge of the eye. Normally, when we draw eyes, we think of them as kind of a almond shape with a point at each end. The eyes in 3/4 are foreshortened, so it's almost like we're seeing the edge of a ball here. That's really important. That's gonna make everything look a bajillion times more realistic. So if you get that down, everything else will look way better. If you find you have a sharp triangle tip here, like that, that's no, don't do that. This may be a little closer, but you can always come back and fix things as you go. Don't forget that. Let's draw in a few fine lines around the eyes before we dive into the actual iris itself. So I'm gonna first check out where I see the upper eyelid crease. So this is the line where the skin around the eye creates a fold as it swoops inward around the sphere of the eyeball. This line looks like it comes up and almost touches the outside edge of this skin. It's such a dark, lost edge though. Don't draw lines if you don't see them. I don't exactly see a line there. I see a really dark shadow. So later we'll go in and draw a dark shadow there. It's okay to just leave it sort of blank. Below the opening of the eye, the rim of the eye seems to curve around the base of this opening of the eye. And up something like that. I think I might have some of the angles of this eye opening off, but we'll play with it. I do see a bit of a sort of very light bag under the eye. It's the end of the orbital socket where the bone structure of the upper cheekbone curves in here. So there's a slight difference in shadow. Just lightly mark that in. And here's the fun part. Let's add the iris and the pupil. So instead of actually drawing the pupil itself, of looking and trying to draw a circle in the eyeball, I'm gonna pay a lot of attention to the white of the eye. What is the little negative space triangle that I see inside the white of the eye? And how about on this side? We will be shading inside of this eye later, which will help it some, but do your best to draw what you see. That's all we can ever do. And anything that doesn't look exactly right, it's gonna be some sort of take on your style, and it's a lot more interesting than drawing things photorealistically. If you want photorealism, go be a photographer. So to really get the texture of this eye and the sort of shiny, bright look in someone's eye, we want to save a white spot, kind of just drawing in a little white shape in the center of the pupil. I'll do a little smaller there. And I'm going to leave that white for the texture later. Then I want to center the pupil perfectly inside of this eye. And the way that I can check this is to say, okay, well, is the distance from the pupil to the iris here the same all the way around? So that should be pretty darn center. Of course, her upper eyelid is hooding the top of the eye, so it won't be perfectly centered from the top of the iris. And just for kicks, I'm gonna shade that in so it doesn't look too weird for now. We're gonna come back and do details a little bit later, but this is the first step of just getting that line work in, the essential shapes of the eye that is farthest from us in the 3/4 view. That's the hardest part of the whole thing. If you can get that down, then the other eye is gonna come along really smoothly. We now have a landmark for where everything else is gonna be placed in the drawing. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we can use the measurement of, for example, the width of this eye and compare that to how far apart the two tear ducts of the eyes are to tell us where to place that eye. So I'm seeing that the placement of the second eye we're about to draw is one eye and a little bit of change distant from the second eye. I know math people hate that. I don't use like particular real fractions and numbers for this, but you know what? It works. I really would not suggest you get a ruler out. It's just gonna put you into a more linear, analytical, what they call left brain thinking. We wanna get in the flow here, where you're just using the tools that you have in your hands to go for it. So we've got the spacing from where this first eye is to where the second eye is going to begin. How wide should that second eye be? If I look at the width of the eye that's closer to us, it is about the same as the distance between the two eyes. How about where the top of the upper eyelid crease is? And match that horizontal plane, teensy bit higher, checking that's nice and horizontal. If your pencil is at an angle, it's not going to work for you. How about the lower eyelid opening? Lower eyelid may appear to be slightly just the weенsiest bit higher on the lower eyelid. The eyebrow is about in line, although of course it's at a slightly different angle. So be something like this, and it begins at an angle about like so. I'm using my pencil trick to place that, and I'm making this a little too high. So using my pencil trick as always, measuring to see what the space between the upper eyelid crease and the eyebrow is. I'm going to start shaping this eye in. I'll start with the upper eyelid crease this time, and kind of comparing the angles. I'm noticing this upper eyelid angles downward here, about 3/4 of the way from the edge of the eye. You'll notice this upper eyelid crease does not actually touch the opening of the eye itself, where the eyelashes grow out from the opening of the eye. And we almost all have a little sort of, I think of it as the tip of a lemon, where a tear duct is, that little tear duct opening. And you can kind of judge the angles using your pencil trick to do an approximation of the curves that are particular to the person you're drawing. In this case, this lady has sort of a steep angle going upward, curves and slides around the top of the eye before curving back downward again, dramatically. The lower eyelid, we want to look for two lines. First, the line where the white of the eye touches the lower eyelid, something like this. And then the lower eyelid rim itself, where the eyelashes grow from. This is going to help your eyes look very realistic. There's a line where the tear duct and the orb of the eyeball itself come out. And just as we did before, look for the negative space of the white of the eye. Again, I'm going to place that bright shape where the reflection of the light is, and then place the pupils perfectly centered inside of the eye. We can go ahead and darken that up. And I want to also stop and check to see how do my two eyes compare. Do they seem to be about the same width in the iris? Lock that in. And now quickly, really lightly drawn just the light line of the circle under the eye. So our first initial line drawing lay-in is complete. Let's go ahead and start adding some shading. I like to use the wide edge of my pencil. You'll notice I hold it a bit differently. And really loosely, I can even squint just to say, okay, where are the light and dark areas in this eye? Seeing shadows in the eye farthest away from us for sure. And this is a sort of step one shading, much lighter than the darker shading that will come in within a little bit here, to give just a vague sense of where the lights and darks will be. But for sure, this back eye is in a lot of shadow. Spare the whites if you see any really bright areas, but then again, you can always come back and erase if you find that you messed up. Let's see the other eye. A bit of shading, this indent bit underneath and around the eye, and definitely in the upper eyelid crease. Very light shading here. Test your pressure that you need. You could even create a value scale at the top of your page, going from dark to light using the wide edge of your pencil. That is a key skill, one of the elements of art that's important in drawing anything. Okay, I've got my overall shading done. You can take a minute to smudge with a finger or a rag or a smudge stick if you happen to have one. If you only have a 2B pencil or your regular yellow pencil, that's cool. Everything else from here on you can do with just more pressure, and that will still really look good. But if you have a 3B or a 4B pencil, or even something extra dark like I'm gonna use an 8B, then you'll get much more depth and darkness and contrast, which is awesome. So 8B, 6B pencil might be something fun to pick up. And let's go ahead and dive into the details and really make these eyes pop. I'm gonna start with the darkest dark always in the eye, and that is in the pupil itself. So I'm pressing down quite hard to get the darkest dark I can. And that sort of acts as a good reference point to see, okay, if this is the darkest dark on the page, how does this other shadow that I'm drawing compare? Is it as dark as that? Is it lighter? It's a nice reference. So where else do we see the darkest dark? Looking at this model, for sure, she's got a very dark rim around her irises. And for sure in the upper eyelids where her upper eyelashes are growing out from, we see a dark line. Almost think of this as drawing in eyeliner. So I'm darkening these lines up, and it automatically is going to really shift the vibe of the drawing. And I'm noticing just how very dark that back eye is. We're going to really turn up the shading there. But let's go ahead and draw a few eyebrow lines, hairlines. The hairs are visible at the top center of her eyebrows. As they grow away from the center of the face, they turn diagonally quite a bit, going almost straight, and then start to curve down just a bit at the temple, but she's got very straight eyebrows here. And they're actually covered by hair, so I'll give a sort of suggestion of that. So we have so much shading and darkness in that back eye. Let's go ahead and turn it up, like add a lot more contrast and shadow back there. So in the upper eyelid crease, there's quite a bit of shadow in the eye itself. Here, the eyebrow. I want to get this one in too. Quite dark up here. Really dark in this dip where there's a bit of a shadow, where the bridge of the nose is shading in to that deep area behind the eye. This line is going to be darker and more clear. You know, I'm not seeing spelled out eyelashes and little linear eyelashy shapes, so I'm not going to draw them that way. I'm just drawing a kind of thicker upper eyelid line. Quite dark in here. You really can't see what all's going on. I'm going to leave it as a lost edge, and we'll darken this edge up in a moment. Get that funny shape completely black. I do want to get some darker, not the darkest, but almost lines for the lower eyelashes, kind of just a smudge in here. Dark in this inner corner of the eye, and quite dark along the bridge of the nose. So it's not actually the line of the nose, but it's the shadow the nose is casting behind on the cheek. Can give a little bit of a suggestion of a nose line, but don't be too hard on your nose line. It can look a little cartoony if you get too linear there. Finally, let's finish up this eye closer to us with a darker dark wherever you see it, which for me is the crease in the upper eyelid. And get a little bit thicker with the eyelashes wherever you see that. One stray hair. And add eyelashes, suggestion of these kind of smudgy little lines in the lower eyelid. And a bit more shadow in some areas below the opening of the eye itself. It's a bit darker. And it's actually quite shaded in the inner white of the eye corner. A bit more shading in here. A little too dark. Try that again. I just smudge with my fingers if I feel like I got a little too linear there. And let's get that shading in at the bottom of the eye. And there you have it, the eyes at a 3/4 angle. I hope that with time, that ability to find angles and measurements using your pencil trick becomes like second nature to you, because that is like a key in being a good artist on the go. If you'd like to work more with me, check out my art school, link in the description below. It is online, and when you post your pictures in there, I can instantly get back with you and cheer you on, give you some tips or encouragement as needed, and it would just make my day to see your version of this drawing. So give it a go, give it 5 goes, practice makes the master, and I hope to see you in our next video where we'll be drawing the nose at a 3/4 angle. See you there.